Hello again, everyone. Welcome to part 2 of our recording for the Digital Technology Curriculum Year 0 to 4. We have, in the first recording, looked at statistics ideas. We're sticking briefly with the maths theme to what we're doing. However, we are also beginning to integrate the arts, in particular visual arts, into our ideas. So looking at the Foundation to Year 2 learning objectives from the Digital Technologies curriculum, recognising and exploring patterns in data, and recognising and exploring that we can represent data as pictures, symbols and diagrams. In particular, over on the right, I'm looking at those level or content descriptors rather, and ideas, and tying in with those. So to start with, there's very obviously a link with algebra. The obvious one being repeating patterns. And down here on my screen, I have got 2 shapes already, and I'm just going to add a third with my shape tool. So over to my toolbar, I'll choose a star. I think I'd like a green one, and it can have a black outline like so. And I'm just going to click and drag. There we go. There we go. So I've got 3 individual shapes here. Now there's a number of ways I can get these to be a repeating pattern. I could select one, I could duplicate it, then I could select the next one, and I could duplicate it, and then and so on. But that's a little bit long-winded. So what I have got here is, in essence, a loop of the pattern. So I want to take all of these items at once, and I'm going to group them together using the group button here in the toolbar above. Okay, and now I could use the duplicate, and they will duplicate all together. And so my pattern loops very easily. All right. Another way I could have done it is I could have saved that to my library. Now, my preference is to save personal things or the children's personal things into the library. So I don't like to put them into the shared library. I like to keep this pretty much as it stands. The only thing I tend to put in here are resource packs that I've downloaded from Promethean Planet. It's up to you. You can make new folders in this library and save items in there. As I say, I like to do it in my my resources side. And as you can see, I clicked on Create New Folder, I typed patterns, and I have a patterns folder here. All right, and you can see, let me just delete this. All right, I've already had a go at saving things in here, showing other people this idea. All right, so I've got my loop or my group of shapes. All I have to do is click on my folder that says patterns so that it opens, and then I simply drag and dump whatever I want into the viewing pane down the bottom. Now you'll notice my cursor's changed, yeah, and I can rename this resource. We'll call it shapes loop. All right, and then I can just drag it out of the library like so if I wanted. Or what I could do, in fact I'll delete that one too, I have a rubber stamp tool attached to my library, and that means that if I have selected or turned on the rubber stamp, whatever I've selected in my library here is going to be able to be stamped. Every time I'm clicking, it's stamping on the page. So I can make my lovely loop or my repetitive pattern as often as I like. Okay. Just turn that, sorry, to turn it off, we click on our mouse cursor over there. All right. I'm going to just go on a tiny tangent and show you that in your shared resources library, under activities and templates, under activities, under maths activities, you have got this page, amongst others, where they've set you up some Lego blocks here, and they've set drag a copy to those Lego blocks so that the students can create their own pattern ready-made for you. So it's a nice, quick, easy, I'm just trying to follow my own pattern, a quick, easy alternative for you to getting the kids up using the software, experimenting, exploring, making their own patterns. All right. So the final idea before I move on to very specifically arty kinds of stuff is the idea that the pattern we're creating has meaning. So I might set up an ambiguous task for my students. They simply have a blank page on the active board, and they can use shapes, they can use the pen tool. What I want them to do is create a pattern. They could even use the blocks on the page previously. I want them to create a pattern that has a meaning. So they're creating a pattern that has no and a pattern that has yes as the meanings. So it could be as simple as this. With my pen tool, I'm setting it to as fat as it will go, and I'm going to put 2 red dots on the page, okay, and 2 green dots on the page. All right, and, sorry, 3 green dots, what am I thinking? Explaining my pattern, red to me means no or stop, don't go, and no has 2 letters, so N-O, N-O, 2 red dots. Conversely, 3 letters, green for go, yes, 3 letters. So although this is a very simplistic kind of angle I've taken, it's the essence of it that I'm trying to get across to you. It doesn't have to be really complicated. If you can create an ambiguous task that allows the students to be creative, to collaborate, to come up together with a pattern that has some meaning for them, you've done everything you can to fulfill that learning outcome. Now, along the theme of patterns having meanings, we can then move on, still using our pen tool. I will just get rid of those. Still using our pen tool, we can start having a look at symbolism. And this is where we're kind of moving into the visual arts. And just having a quick scan through the New Zealand Visual Arts curriculum at level 1. The kids are going to be doing things like sharing ideas about how and why their own and others' artworks are made and their purpose, value and context, explore a variety of materials and tools and discover elements and selected principles, investigate visual ideas in response to a variety of motivations, observation and imagination. Imagination being very important, I feel. Share the ideas, feelings and stories communicated by their own and others' objects and images. Looking at the Australian curriculum for Foundation to Year 2, the students will explore ideas, experiences, observations and imagination to create visual artworks and design, including considering ideas and artworks by Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islanders. Use and experiment with different materials, techniques, technologies and processes to make artworks. create and display artworks to communicate ideas to an audience, respond to visual artworks and consider where and why people make visual artworks, starting with visual artworks from Australia, including visual artworks of Aboriginal and Torres Strait Island people. So this ties in, again, you can see those New Zealand and Australian curriculums, very similar. Who did invent Pavlova? So I'm going along the theme of the Māori and Pacifica symbolism because it's what I'm more familiar with, and I've also included another idea for Australian teachers further on to do with Aboriginal and Torres Strait art. So the koru is a bit of a pivotal symbol in a lot of design or Māori artwork. Let me draw, oops, a little bit hard to kind of draw there. So although this actually does tie in beautifully again with maths, I am looking at it as an art theme. I just do want to share with you some of the mathematical elements to the patterns and also reinforce that whole meaning or symbolism of the artwork. So for instance, if I were to draw, and please forgive my drawing with a mouse, I'm going to draw, oops, that's terrible, start again. Okay, whoop. All right, so I've drawn there a single supposedly balanced koru, and with my mouse cursor turned on, what I can do is if I right click on this object, and indeed any object on your page, you have the option to transform. Let me just drag that up a bit so that we can see it at the bottom of the screen. So under transform, you can see I have the option to mirror or flip things. In this instance, I want to mirror in the y-axis. Now, at the moment, my single koru may represent or symbolize new life, growth, or perhaps even peace. And I've now mirrored it, but I'm actually going to mirror it a little bit closer. I'm just going to do a tiny adaptation here because I did unfortunately have to draw it with a mouse and it didn't turn out quite how I wanted. Now, by mirroring that, what I've come up with is a different symbol altogether, a double balanced koru, or in this I've tried to make it look like Te Mango Pare, or the hammerhead shark, and so the meaning has changed to symbolize strength and power. So I've then gone and tried to use the hammerhead shark here in a bit of another pattern that I then wanted to either flip, mirror, tessellate to create my own kawhaiwhai pattern. Now, if you're not sure what, oh, that was interesting. Okay. If you're not sure what a kawhaiwhai pattern was, I was just surprised at how slowly that all came together. Up here, I have embedded some useful links. So over here, we've got background information. It's an education kit from the Auckland Museum on kawhaiwhai patterns. And I've got another one on tuku patterns, because that could also tie in with this idea. And this PDF here, which I've already opened, is, come back here, everything's jumping over my screen, some of the common Kawhaiwhai patterns out there, or that are well known, and what they are supposed to represent. So again, looking at the patterns, the symbolism of those, the meaning of those, and asking the students to come up with their own Kawhaiwhai design to tell their own story or to symbolize their own story. Okay, and of course the same can be true for your tupper cloths and the lovely Pacifica patterns that are out there that can be put together to tell a story or symbolize meaning in the students' own lives. Final link on this page is actually up here. Takes us out to a website on geometry because it beautifully ties in. Okay, so whilst we've still got the math theme, that was essentially an art theme, and allowing the students to be drawing their patterns on the interactive board or interactive panel, or if you've got cows, computers on wheels, so a pod of laptops that goes around from classroom to classroom, they can of course have ActivInspire loaded on them, and you can be allowing the students to draw, although as I demonstrated, not quite as easy with a mouse cursor. There are different ways around that. All right, moving on to the years 3 and 4 and to the Aussie example. So we're going to be looking at exploring codes and symbols that are representations of data. So a step on from what we were doing. And over the page, I've popped for our reference this diagram here. And essentially it's the same kind of thing. So the students would be creating their own story or their own map, their own artwork using these visual elements. And as mentioned back in the LO over the page, we can explore how the same data can be represented in different ways, or perhaps in this instance it's better to say how the same data can actually represent many things or have many meanings. For instance, the 3 circles down here, they can represent ants, fruits, flowers or eggs. These lines, wavy lines, could represent smoke, water flow, lightning or bushfire. You've got these lines representing a sandhill or a cloud. There's many examples of the different meanings that the symbols can have depending where the people drawing them came from or hail from. So the idea is that you're using your Flowchart page as a digital rock face to create your own artwork or your own story or your own map using these symbols. And once again, just a reminder that the students are able to add things to the library as well. So if, for instance, they were planning to use the same symbol repeatedly, so they might be going to use, oops, that's very large, the wavy lines, and they've created their wavy lines. They can save those to the library. Great. I'll just pop it in patterns. And pull them out to use whenever they would like. To change the colour of those, they can use the paint bucket. So if they decided they were wanting them but in a different colour, oops, perhaps the colour will be the difference in meaning for them. All right, and what you can end up with is almost in essence a bit of a visual dictionary in your library, or a visual dialect, or a dialect of a visual language, I suppose is what I'm trying to say. All right, on to Morse code. So this one was quite a fun one actually. Now you can just use the pen tool to be writing on the board to create the Morse code pattern. I probably wouldn't have this taking up so much space on the board for the students. That would probably either be on a piece of paper for them to reference, or perhaps on a previous page. And they're using the pen tool to create their own message. If, like me, you like to pay particular attention to making sure everything is just exactly right, you can of course right-click on your page and add a grid using your grid designer like I have. So you just tick visible, use plus or minus to make your squares bigger or smaller, and down here you can change the colour of your squares should you wish to. Ooh. Okay. I've put a word on the page there for you. If you're clever enough to figure it out, it is the word bat. I did want to write the word bar because it's probably where we'd all rather be right now, but T was a lot shorter to write than R, so that's why we got bat. I also used the pen modifier to make my lines exactly straight here. Again, absolutely don't have to, but if you like straight lines, this is how you would turn on your pen modifier. You have to select your pen, or you could do it with your highlighter. Then you go into your other tools store and choose pen modifier, and you choose which way you'd like your pen to draw, in this instance horizontal lines. And it doesn't matter, you can see where I'm dragging my pen on the page, it will only draw a straight line. Okay. And obviously I made my pen quite fat to achieve those lines. An extension of this could be that you're using your sound recorder. So the children could be recording dash and dots for other students to listen to. So you're adding in a different element. It's not just a visual, it's also an audio code. And that's about all I've got to say about that page. And now, without further ado, we're going on to the writing part, which is the part I'm most excited about. All right, so the green highlighter on the right are things I'll mainly cover off in the following examples, but the orange is also something happening as an incidental. Okay, so I've got a few examples here. The first one is more of a pre-writing activity. So the students were given a problem: what will the pirate wear on which day of the week? So they had to put together what he would wear. So you can see here on Monday he is going to wear his brown boots, so we'll just group those. Okay, and Tuesday he's wearing his hat, Wednesday he's wearing his jacket. All right, then they dressed the pirate and they were asked to record the sequence. So I'll just drag on, oh gosh, what day am I up to? Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. There we go. All right. So then they had to record and and so on. So you might look at this and think, well, how on earth is that related to writing and to the digital curriculum? For a start, you're looking at sequencing. You're sequencing the days of the week. You're sequencing how the pirate got dressed. You're sequencing the steps that you had to take in order to record the sequencing as a sound file. Now, the kids had decision making. They had to decide what the pirate would wear on what day. They had to verbalize that sequence, because if they can't organize it in their heads to speak it, they won't be able to write it down properly. Recording that process on top, incidental alert, it was a way of helping the students have a purpose for verbalizing the sequence, but they've also learnt the skills of using the sound recorder, and in fact they've also learnt how to attach the sound file to a shape. And all they've done there is, there's this sound bite that would have gone onto their page when they recorded, so it was little like that. They've dragged it over top of an image, they've stretched it, they've made it invisible, and they've grouped it to the chest so that it always moves around with it. So there is a lot of learning that's taken place on that page. So we're looking at sequencing verbally here. The next obvious step was a sequencing or instructional explanation text. So once again, using peripherals like a digital camera or an ActivView, which can take photos live and put them on your Flowchart page, to capture photos of something relevant to the kids' world. So you might be wondering who this good-looking man down here is. This is my friend Peter, who is a caretaker at a school that I taught at. And he was an absolute favourite person in the school with this particular class. So I captured action shots of him one day making jam on toast for his breakfast at school. And the kids, we put the photos up on the board, and the students had to sequence them. So put them in order clockwise, like this. I think that's about right. Butter, jam. Oh, I'll just put that there because I'm running out of space. There we go. All right, and then the idea is that they're just using the pen, red will do, and they are linking those pictures, you draw arrows on those lines, of course, to get the sequence of the events. Now, it might seem strange to use the caretaker as our example, but these students were so excited to see Peter's face up on the board. They were so excited to then race off and do their writing so that they could show Peter how they wrote about him, that I don't think I could have found a better motivation for them to write. So you'll find motivation wherever it falls, go for it. Now, in addition to using the pen tool to sequence these, we could have also then used the sound recorder to take verbal snippets of each stage of the process. This, again, helps reinforce the words that they need to use. Again, if they can organise it in their head to say it, they will be able to then have a go at writing it down. And on the next page, we have got the outcomes of a small group of students who worked with the teacher. The rest of the class were off writing their instructions. So let me just pop back. The students got this page with the pictures all muddled up. That was sent off to the photocopier. So the students who were going to be working independently at their tables had the images. They cut those out, they glued them in their book in the right sequence, and next to those images they wrote each instruction or each step of the process, and this was work done with the teacher at the board, so a small group. We did have images on this page as well. We had less images just to make it a little bit simpler for us. And the reason the images are no longer there and the reason they're all out of order is because we purposefully typed each instruction in a different text box so that they moved around differently. And at the end of our session, we muddled up our instructions, and the rest of the class had to come and put that story put the instructions into the correct sequence at the end. So that was like a plenary. Okay. Another example, I'll just open here. Apologies if I've used this example before. The instructions on how to play snaps. So this time the students, instead of just a one-pager of text, they actually made a little e-book. So every time we did a genre of writing, we would create together as a class a blown-up book or a big book electronically, so an electronic shared book. And we could pull that out at any time to read. So the students have recorded the words so that anyone in our class who was perhaps a very emergent reader could click on the words to hear them, and they've recorded sounds to go with the pictures. And as you can see here, they've also taken photos of themselves playing Snap in this instance to go along with the story. So quite simple instructions, but one instruction per page. And we've used different tools. We've used the shape tool to create that border. We used straight line pen to create that. So we're incidentally learning about the tools of the software. And of course, we're using the camera tool to cut our photos out, our desktop camera tool to cut our photos out and place them on the page there. All right. There we go. Okay, moving on. Sequencing events. Straight out of the content descriptor a few pages back, but this ties in beautifully with your typical health units like me, myself and I, or whatever it is they call that unit now. Once again, images that the students have brought in to do with milestones of events in their lives. So, you know, they were born, they learnt to crawl, they learnt to walk, they learnt to ride a bike, they learnt to read, perhaps. And at the bottom of the page, I've just popped on some text there with time connectors or sequences, if you prefer, to help sequence the images. All right, so first I was born, after that I learnt to crawl, then I learnt to walk, later I learnt to ride a bike, finally, you know, whatever they choose. And of course, we've got our wonderful sound recorder here in the tools store, and we can ask the students to verbally record their sequence of events. Once again, getting them to do that puts everything in order in their head. Getting it in order in their head, able to verbalize it, they're more than likely going to be able to write that down, or at least have a jolly good go at writing that down. Okay, so moving on to higher up the levels, years 3 and 4. And my next examples I've sort of gone a little bit outside the box on my interpretation of these content descriptors because they are just examples. The green highlighter here shows where I've absolutely conformed to exactly what is written in the example I'm sharing, or examples I'm sharing, whereas the orange highlighter is vaguely what I've based everything on. I've just taken a little bit of poetic license because it is written language after all. Now, I think the ideas fit in really well, but it's perhaps not exactly what you might have thought of when you were originally looking at the content descriptors here in the digital technologies curriculum. But see what you think. All right. So really, this is where we're starting to look into the more technical side of the digital technologies curriculum, the more structured use of software. Pretty much we're now dabbling in the coding realm. And I think it's fair to say that over the last year or so, I've read literally dozens of books on coding for kids. And out of all of them, this is my favorite book. This is the cover of it right here. I found it in my local library in Lake Macquarie, and it's awesome. The reason I like it so much is that it really clearly and simply explains things that I might need to know about coding. I didn't grow up with computers. I was around them, but they weren't a particular interest or strength of mine until about 15 years ago. So I have somewhat patchy knowledge where they're involved. I know what I know. And when coding became the latest buzz, and then the DTC came out saying all teachers must teach coding, I confess my tummy did a bit of a flip-flop and I freaked out just a tiny bit. But I have since discovered, largely from books like this, that it's actually nowhere near as hard as I thought it would be to get my head around. And it's a really exciting time for us as teachers to be involved in this level of technology. And I also discovered I already knew a lot about coding that I didn't know I knew, and I was already teaching a lot of incidental coding stuff as well. So as we go through things, maybe you're going to see this as well. Anyway, I recommend this book, especially if you're a bit freaked out by the coding buzz. It does use Scratch, as you can see here. If you don't know what Scratch is, it's a free software that allows you to give computers instructions, or in other words, to code. It shows kids how sequences of instructions build up like blocks to create a result or an action in a game or activity. And this is a quote from the book, and you know, in simple terms, this is coding. A computer can't think for itself. It works by blindly following instructions. It can only carry out a complex task if that task has been broken down into simple steps that tell it exactly what to do and in what order. Writing these instructions in a language a computer understands is called coding. Now remember that you can use software like Scratch on your Promethean interactive whiteboard or panel. You can use any software you've got a license for. Scratch is free. You'll be able to use it. All right. So can you code in ActivInspire? Well, by the definition here, yes, you can to a degree. You can set actions in the Inspire software, and when you set actions, what you are doing is telling the computer what to do in a series of specific steps. Okay, so I've put coding related stuff because it's not what I would call pure coding, but it's a really good introduction to it. The idea or the concept that a computer will not do anything unless you've given it an instruction to do something. And there's hundreds of different examples I could have given, and I hope I've chosen some interesting ones for you. as we go higher up the curriculum, so in our next webinar series with the years 5 to year 8, I'll be looking at a lot more of the actions and application of those actions and settings and so forth. So if this sort of makes you a little bit more curious to know more about the more complex side of ActivInspire, even if you're teaching younger children, come and join us for the year 5 to 8 webinars, because I'm going to go into this side of ActivInspire a lot more, with a lot more examples. Okay, so my main example here is setting up a pick-a-path story. You may remember them from your childhood. You'd read a page, and at the bottom of the page you had to make a decision about where you wanted the story to go, and you had a couple of options, and it would tell you what page to turn to continue reading with that decision that you made. And you can see here that I have the beginnings of a flow chart going on. So I've just pulled a background out of my library. So in the resources library, under shared resources, remember you've got all these great backgrounds. I just pulled on a background to make it look more interesting, if you're wondering why my page looks pretty. You'll recognize shapes and text, and I've just grouped those, okay? So I've taken my text, I've put it on my shape, and I've grouped it together like so. I've got some key points here to help me. And these are, I've set drag a copy to. So if the keys are not found, who will he ask? And then I've got over on my toolbar here a connector tool, and I do believe I've got that one set. He might ask, oops, got the wrong color, blue. He might ask Mrs. T or Mrs. L. Okay, and so on. So I'm building up my flowchart here. Now the good thing about connectors is they're stretchy, so I can move these all the way around the page. If I haven't got room somewhere, I can move that to where I do have room. And if I've put it on the wrong person or the wrong item, I select it by clicking on it, and above it there will be a small toolbar, and you use the yellow point, and then I can take that to put where I need, okay, like so. All right, so this is, if we're looking back at the objectives here, this is my flowchart rather than a storyboard, because with a pick-a-path book, there are many different alternative outcomes. I thought I would rather have a flowchart to represent my plan than a storyboard. So this page was really just about showing you how you've got text, shape, and connectors to create your own flowchart. Now this one might be a step beyond what you've got time for. Just be aware, connectors connect to anything. So here's some writing I've put on the page, and I can connect a connector to that writing, okay? And then I can move that anywhere. So this could be all handwritten, yeah? Right, now my pick-a-path story is a book. I've chosen a story that my students created. Now, I've just taken an old narrative I had. It was written by Year 1 and Year 2 kids, but that's probably easier for us today, as it has less text and less plot to sift through. So as you can see, I could just turn the page and go through the story as the students initially wrote it, from start to finish, okay? The gist of it is our principal had lost his keys. And these are all the people he asked to help him find it. Okay, so hence on my plan here, who's he going to ask? Were the keys found? No. Always it's going to be Mrs. L who finds them. She was the office lady, and obviously she was the one who was going to know because office ladies always are. But all I've done to change the story here is add in the question at the bottom of the page, like it used to be in our Pick a Path books. Who will Mr. Sayer ask next? Will it be Miss H or will it be Mrs. T, for instance? And if we click on these, it will take us directly to the page with that person. So for instance, I'm actually on this page here, as you can see in my page browser, and if I were to click on Mrs. L, it would now, oh, I haven't set it to that one, I've only set it to Mrs. T. It would now take us to this page. Okay, now we're going to set, yes, these ones are not set. I'm going to show you how you will set the action to turn to a set page. Now the only trick is you need to know what page you want to turn to. And I do believe the kids are page 3 and Miss H is page 4. So I click on my button that I've made here, and again you can see it's grouped. I've just taken a simple shape, the text that says the kids, group them together. I select that on the page so that it's got those bubbles around it. Then I go to the spinning top icon in my browser. Remember, if your browser's missing, it's Control B or Command B to bring it back, or View, Browser. Okay, so I click on my button, I go to the spinning top, and these are all of the different actions you have available to you to set in the ActivInspire software. So you can see there's a lot of stuff you can do. Have a play in here. I recommend just having a go. You'll probably figure it out. Nothing's too complicated. Everything is in alphabetical order in this list. You've got a drop-down menu here where you can sort through just different types of actions. So because I'm talking about turning to different pages, that's a page action, and I'm going to cut our list down so we don't have to scroll through. And as you can see there, I've got quite a lot of different options available to me. I want to choose select another page. And this is where I need to know the number. So the kids are page 3. This is the most important button, and one that probably the first time you do this you might forget. I still do it sometimes, I still forget. Apply changes. All right, so now when I hover over that button, I've got a play symbol. All right, let's also do Miss H. So I click on that button, I go to another page, and she is page 4, apply changes, done. All right, so now if I were to click on either of these, it's going to take us to that page. And you can jump between the parts of the story. So where does this fit in with our objective? If we go back to here, it's here where it's talking about designing and implementing a simple interactive digital solution, blah, 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 blah. They're talking about a guessing game. Well, I've kind of not gone for guessing game, more as a self-directed book. And here, user input, implementing programs that make decisions on the basis of user input choices, such as through selecting a button, pushing a key, or moving a mouse to branch into different segments of the solution. So it's almost like I've merged those two ideas in the Pick a Path idea. All right, moving on. As well as setting actions to tell the computer, so like we set the page actions to direct the computer to turn to the page that we wanted to in the Pick a Path book, as well as setting actions to tell the computer what to do, you can also set restrictors so that other things happen or don't happen, as might be in this case. So we can restrict movement, the movement of an object, to only move in a certain way. And I'm going to make this planet Earth orbit on a set path around the fiery sun here. So to do this, I'm going to restrict it to a path, and I'm going to choose an oval or an ellipse. I'll do it yellow so that we can see it. Actually, I'll do it green. It'll probably show up better. Nice fat one. All right. And I'll stretch that out like so. There we go. Okay. And just like the containers, what I've got to make sure of is that my object is sitting on top of that path, where my writing for my little sticky note in recording 1, my post-it note, my writing had to be on top of the post-it note. My earth has to be on top of this hoop. So I'm just going to reorder and bring my earth to the top layer so that it sits on top there. Then I'm going to click on my earth so that it's selected here. And I'm going to come not to my action browser, because remember, I'm not setting an action, I'm setting a restrictor. So I go to my property browser and I go down to restrictors. And I come down to where it says can move freely. So I'm talking about the earth because it's selected on the page. And at the moment, that can move anywhere on the page. Can move, I want to change that to say along a path. Okay, so now that earth can only move, what's happening? Have I locked it? Beg your pardon, I haven't quite finished my steps. I've selected can move along a path. I've then got to define in the bottom underneath what that pathway is. So it can only move along this path. So I select my path on the page and I say, okay, apologies, it's been a very long afternoon for me. All right, so now, no matter where I'm trying to move that, it's only going to move along that hoop. Now, the final step for me in this particular example, I don't want to see the path, so I select the green hoop or ellipse, and I use my translucency slider, and I make it completely invisible, okay? And now it appears that the Earth is orbiting the Sun. Very good. All right. Now this is my final example for today, and I haven't specifically related it to any particular subject area, as I'm more interested in showing you guys more of the cool functionality of the Inspire software here. I think you'll find that once you show the kids some of these actions or restrictors, they will naturally try applying them in their own flipchart creations in all subjects. Even your young kids will pick it up and run with it. I had 5- and 6-year-olds using move along a path for characters in a story they were constructing. We'd done it in science in a similar example to this, and they had transferred that skill when they were working independently at the board, creating a fairy tale. They transferred the skill to make sure that Red Riding Hood stayed on the path through the woods there was a pathway in the background that they'd chosen, and they set her to follow a particular path through the woods, which is pretty cool when you think about it. So some other restrictors which are super easy and quite useful. Number one, moving horizontally or vertically. So you can, you saw before we restricted the movement of the Earth to only moving along a path. Well, we can also restrict the movement of something so that it only moves either horizontally, or in this case, I want it to move vertically. So I've just put my flag up against the flagpole there, and I'm going to now set the restrictor. I've selected it on my page, so we're doing the Kiwi flag here. I will set the restrictor so that it can't move freely, it can only move vertically. Okay, and now, no matter where I try to move it, it will only go up or down. Now, as you can see, it will go up or down the whole of the page. Oh, I've dropped it there. Sorry, flag. And I don't want that to happen. So something else you can do is you can set things to block. So I'm going to come and grab a shape, and I'm going to make it sit here. I'm going to select that shape, and I'm going to, in my same property browser, set a restrictor. You can see the first option under restrictors, can block. At the moment, that's not true. My line will not stop my flag going up or down. All right. If I change that, oh, I hate it how it does that. If I change that to, say, true, here we go. Now that line stops my flag. And what I want to do is not be able to see that line, so I'm going to use my sneaky trick once again of sliding my translucency slider all the way across to make that invisible. I'm also at the same time going to duplicate it and move the duplicated one down. Oops, it's a bit hard because it's see-through, so that it blocks top and bottom an invisible line. Yeah. So there we go. By going back into my properties, sorry, by going back into my action browser and adding that negative in front of the 30, I have fixed a little problem I had, and my flag is now going up the flagpole in increments of 30 pixels until it reaches my invisible blocker. So hopefully you've had at least a little bit of a taste of some of the depth or capacity of the ActivInspire software. I could run an entire day course just on actions and restrictors, I think. There's a lot of very cool things you could do. And of course, once again, thanks for joining us. If you have any questions or comments, please don't hesitate to get in touch. Our contact details are there on the screen, and if you're interested in knowing more about the actions and restrictors, do join us for the next session, because even though we're going up the school, so years 5 to 8, I'll be using examples that are all transferable. So the stuff we've done today, if you think about it, you could make it harder curriculum-wise, but using the same skills that we've looked at today. It's simply that the examples that I've chosen to use have focused on the younger years in this particular webinar. So well done if you've made it through both recordings. As I said, I had intended that this was going to be a snappy half hour for all examples, and I really didn't have a hope. So see you next time. Hopefully I'll cull it down a little bit for us. Ka kite, everyone.